All right, so we're seeing the rhetoric really ramp up. Both sides seem to be digging in, but you think we're actually getting closer and closer to a resolution. What's leading you to that conclusion?
Yeah, these are political events, so you have to sort of look at politics. And the politics is that when the checks don't go out to employ federal employees, which does have a sort of minor economic effect, but even more importantly, when the checks don't go out to our military, that's a political impact. Politicians don't like that. And I think you'll see this thing, end in a couple of weeks. That's what the betting markets are saying as well. And then we can just move on to the next shutdown.
All right. How does the lack of reaction in the markets play a part in these negotiations, at least from the White House side? We've seen the White House influenced by moves in bond yields in the past. We just haven't seen it that time around. And also the equity markets are hitting new all-time highs.
Yeah, listen, I think there's no doubt that if we saw a big disruption in the market, that the politicians, on both sides of the aisle would notice that. But that sort of gets to my point. These really are just sort of, at least in the near term, these are really political events. It's not like the debt ceiling, which is a far more serious happening. So we're going to get these shutdowns. There don't seem to be any sort of disincentives to avoid this. In fact, there are incentives to keep doing this because you don't see anything in the markets. And apparently politicians feel like this sort of base signaling that we're out there fighting, whether it's the Democrats this time or the Republicans during previous shutdowns, they seem to think that that helps them in some way. And as long as those are the incentives, we'll continue to see these shutdowns from time to time.
All right. But you do think there's consequences specifically for the Fed. You think that the Fed has the potential to go into their October meeting, quote unquote, flying blind. But I do want to push back on that a bit. We did miss one jobs report. There's potential to miss the CPI and the PPI. But doesn't the Fed have the general direction? Is one set of these reports, one monthly report, enough to shake the direction that they're already going in?
Boy, I'd really hate to take that risk. I don't want right now, especially at this point where we're wondering where inflation is still above the target, where there's concerns, do we begin cutting now? Is now too soon? I don't want the Fed relying merely on, private jobs data, Google searches, that kind of thing. I want these policymakers to have all the information possible. And while these shutdowns don't really have a short-term economic effect, a central bank making a wrong decision because they don't have as much information as they have, that can have a longer-term economic effect. And that's the thing I'm really worried about.
All right. I want to switch gears just a bit here. What do you make of the president posting on social media about the housing market? There's 2 million empty lots in his estimation, really urging the home builders to build more houses. How should we be viewing this? This is a president that seems to be very interested in being very involved in public companies and also just corporations in general and trying to dictate how they run their businesses. How do you view this?
Listen, I think it's great when politicians are concerned about housing affordability. That said, you can go about it the wrong way. And I think sort of somebody in Washington making a demand that, a private company, in this case builders, start doing something when clearly the market signals they're getting are telling them to do something else. I think particularly with housing, I would hope that we have learned a lesson from 2008 about trying to sort of, juice demand for housing, especially since we seem to have a long-term supply problem, which is only partially related to interest rates. It's mostly sort of a local issue involving housing regulations, zoning regulations. And my concern in this case specifically would be that if we begin to sort of, ease credit, encourage people to take on mortgages, increase demand, while that supply doesn't react in any kind of immediate way, then you get a mismatch. Then I think it becomes an inflationary issue. So I think this is just a terrible road to go down. You want to have the president use the bully pulpit, not on companies, but to tell states and local governments to begin rezoning to make it easier to build.